This week on Monday, I did a podcast on the 6 ghosts of fear that Napoleon Hill talked about. To refresh your recollection, those were the fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, the fear of loss of love of someone, fear of old age, and fear of death. Not coincidentally, Napoleon Hill said that those were listed in the order that he saw them in his students. And this week I asked you on Wednesday to go back and listen to that podcast, take a look at the 6 ghosts of fear, and rate yourself which ones you found to be most prevalent, which one actually most prevalent. And it was interesting. It was exactly the same. It was poverty, number one, criticism, and then ill health, certainly. And so I wanted to spend a few minutes to talk about how you can work on those. If you haven't already, go back and read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. You would also be wise to read Release Your Brakes by Jim Newman, both of which deal with how to change circumstances like that and how to change your mind to more positive things. But I want to read a couple things that were written by Napoleon Hill and about this subject, which I think will be helpful for you. Fear of poverty. This fear is harbored by people who allow their minds to dwell on the circumstances, on things they do not want. All thoughts have the habit of attracting one of the things one thinks about. This explains why one must condition his mind with a success consciousness before he can attract success. The emotions of faith and fear have equal pulling power. One act attracts failure, the other attracts success, as surely as water runs downhill in response to the law of gravity. The fear of poverty. Now, why anyone should be afraid of poverty in a great nation like this, where opportunity abounds on every hand, is more than I can understand. But I do know that the vast majority of my students, this is Napoleon Hill talking, have to be treated first for the fear of poverty. They have to be made success conscious, and you'll never be successful at anything until you become success conscious. You have to get over the idea of self-limitation. Boy, is that ever true. And there was some commentary on that. Napoleon Hill published Think and Grow Rich in 1937 as a response to the Great Depression of the 1930s. Millions of Americans went unemployed and people's money worries were at an all-time high, far worse than the current economic downturn. Well, that's true even today. Hill wanted to address the negative psychological impact of not having enough money, knowing the devastating effect that this has on an individual. He encouraged people to develop a success consciousness, the practice of visualizing their wealth in their own mind before it actually arrived. Failure to do so leads to a fear of poverty, a paralyzing state of mind in which you repeatedly think, I'll never have enough money, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, leading to a downward mental spiral. Boy, is that true as well. You know, I took a look back over my history, and there was a point in time early in this entrepreneurial journey that I did run out of money and was broke. Had no credit, house was in foreclosure. I managed to get that out of foreclosure. I had $40 to my name, no credit at that point. So I guess if you consider $40 not being broke, then I wasn't broke. But when you have $40 in your pocket and that's all the resources, that's pretty broke. And I went about saying, okay, is my plan solid? I believed it was. Do I have the right people around me? I believe that I did. And then I needed to continually take action. It's easy to let your mind dwell on the negative aspects of being broke, if you will, or without financial wherewithal. So I began to say, okay, how can I get over this? First, I said I need some money. So I began to call people who I thought would loan me money. Interestingly enough, some of the people I thought surely would loan me money did not. And I've given this example before, a person I was 100% convinced would loan me nothing, loaned me $10,000, which when you had $40 in your pocket was a big deal. So I went through that process. If you've never borrowed money and made those calls, it's a humbling experience, to be sure. But that gave me enough runway that I could continue on. I had an affirmation that I would repay those people. I did that, and I was convinced that I would be successful. So how do you do that? An example is pretty worthwhile is to think about Jim Carrey. He was broke. I don't know how broke he was. He used to sit above the Hollywood Hills, look down on that. He wanted to be a successful actor. He wasn't at the time. And he wrote himself out a check, dated it in the future for $10 million for acting services rendered. Kept that in his wallet. Looked at that whenever he opened his wallet. Probably wasn't a whole lot in there, but that check was in there. And almost to the day, 3 years later, after some other acting experiences, he got the role of Dumb and Dumber, and not so coincidentally, was paid $10 million for that. So again, keep your mind on what you want and off what you don't want. The mind can only carry one thought at one time. If you have a headache and you hit your thumb with a hammer, you don't remember the headache anymore. You think about how much your thumb hurts. So when those thoughts come into your mind of poverty, understand that at that point you need to rip that thought out like a weed in the garden and replace it with a more positive thought. Jim Carrey did that, writing a check to himself 3 years in advance. But look at your affirmations. Remember those goals. We will find that if you're able to consistently do that, and that takes work, keep your mind on what you want, off what you don't want. If you have a solid plan, if you have people around you that you're comfortable, have experience that will help you get to that, and you take daily action, remember that almost all successful people have gone through tremendous financial struggles along the way. Very few were overnight successes. And you just begin to think about all the people that did that. I saw recently Sylvester Stallone that wrote Rocky, and it was a very similar thing. He was essentially broke. He had to sell his dog because he didn't have enough money to pay for dog food when he was going through that process. He kept plugging away at it, he kept working at it, and the rest is history. And success is complete with examples of that. So think about, simply stated, think about what you want and keep your mind off what you don't want. And if you do that and surround yourself, as I said, with a plan, the right people, and take action, you will advance more likely than not towards that goal. If you don't know how to do this and your interest is in business acquisition, go over to brucewhipple.com. There's free materials there. The all-new Deep Dive Bootcamp is there as well, which goes step by step, the process, templates, scripts, etc. And then today, depending upon when you're listening to this, every month I do a live Q&A for bootcamp members only, and that will be tonight, Friday at 6 p.m., where you can ask questions. So that's something that I think is important to do, to interact with the people that are actually taking action towards this. So remember, you're not alone. Fear of poverty was number one on the list, but there is a way to overcome that, and that is through keeping your mind on what you want, off what you don't want, taking action, having a plan, having the right people around you. And if you do that and keep on it and don't quit, more likely than not, you will achieve some success along the way.